once upon a time. In a small, quiet village, there stood an old house. Its walls had witnessed decades of laughter, stories, and love. Inside lived two elderly couples, Mr. and Mrs. Rohan, and their lifelong friends, Mr. and Mrs. Lath. Once, this house had been alive with joyful chaos. Children running down the halls, grandchildren playing in the garden. But now, silence had taken over. The rooms echoed with memories of the past, while the present seemed empty. The couples would sit in the living room, sipping tea, glancing at old photo albums. Occasionally, a sigh would escape, and a soft murmur of memory would fill the air. "I can hardly remember the last time the children came to visit," Mrs. Rohan said quietly. "Life moves so fast. Sometimes we forget the ones who raised us," replied Mr. Latha, staring out the window at the quiet garden. One rainy evening, as the world outside was washed in sheets of silver, a faint scratching sound came from the doorstep. Curious and concerned, Mrs. Rohan opened the door, and there, shivering with fear, was a tiny squirrel. Its little paw injured, eyes wide with uncertainty. Her heart immediately went out to the fragile creature. "Oh, you poor thing. You've been through so much," she whispered. "We'll take care of you, little one." "Don't worry," Mr. Latha added, as they gently brought the squirrel inside, wrapping it in a soft cloth. They dried her fur, bandaged her tiny paw, and placed her in a warm corner. For the first time in many years, warmth returned to their hearts. A small life, so fragile, had awakened something they thought was lost forever hope. Slowly, the little squirrel began to explore her new She nibbled on tiny pieces of fruit, hopped across the carpet, and eventually climbed into their laps, as if saying, "I belong here." "She's so small, yet she's brought something big back into this house," Mrs. Latha said, watching the squirrel curl up contentedly. "I haven't felt this happy in years," Mr. Rohan said, smiling. "Maybe she's here to remind us how to live again." Days passed, and Chinu, as they named her, became more than a guest. She became family. She sat with them at the dining table, listened as they spoke, and even curled up beside them at night. The house, which had felt like a museum of memories, now echoed with life again. Kainu's tiny antics chasing toys, peering out the window, and curling up in their laps brought endless smiles and laughter. Then, life surprised them once more. Chinu was not alone. She carried new life within her. One quiet morning, beneath the old wooden staircase, she gave birth to 3 tiny babies. The elderly couples watched in awe, tears of joy glistening in their eyes, as this small creature brought new beginnings into their lives. They marveled at the little family, nuzzling and moving about the corner of the room. "The house feels alive again, thanks to these little ones," Mrs. Latha whispered. "Sometimes the smallest creatures teach us the biggest lessons," Mr. Rohan added. The once silent house now buzzed with tiny paws, cheerful chatter, and endless smiles. Neighbors passing by noticed the glow on their faces. Even their children, curious about the stories of the squirrel family, began visiting, again bringing back the bond they had almost lost. Children peered through windows, offering small treats to Chinu and her babies, while the elderly couples laughed, welcomed them in. The garden was filled with the soft sounds of life once more, blending the laughter of humans with a gentle patter of tiny paws. They had thought they were forgotten, that their home would remain empty forever. But love finds you in the most unexpected forms. In saving a tiny life, they had saved themselves, discovering joy, gratitude, and a love that transcended the boundaries between human and animal. "Who would have thought a little squirrel could bring so much happiness?" Mrs. Rohan said, gazing at the playful little family. "Sometimes it's the smallest things that change everything," Mr. Rohan replied, smiling warmly. And so, in that old house, 2 elderly couples and a tiny squirrel family lived happily ever after. A reminder that love, in all its forms, has the power to heal, transform, and bring life back to even the quietest hearts. The house that had once been silent now glowed with warmth, laughter, and the joyful chaos of life, proof that sometimes the smallest creatures can make the biggest difference.